Hello friends again, welcome back to Shadows of Revenge. First of all, tell me, where are you from the world watching my video? This is a true story, so watch till end. My name is Curtis Hale. The first night, Karen told him to sleep in the guest room. It didn't feel like the beginning of the end. It felt small, temporary. One of those minor compromises married people make without realizing how quietly they can reshape a life. She said it gently, standing in the doorway of their bedroom. Her arms crossed not in defense, but in fatigue. Her eyes looked tired in a way he hadn't seen before, shadows beneath them like bruises from weeks of poor sleep. She didn't accuse him. She didn't argue. She simply said she couldn't rest anymore, that his snoring had gotten worse, that the nights had become unbearable. He laughed at first, half apologetic, half confused. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of sharing a bed, and now this. He offered solutions immediately, the way he always did. A doctor, a sleep study, no strips, anything. He would fix it. He always tried to fix things. But Karen shook her head and waved it away, as if the effort itself would be exhausting. She said she didn't want to turn it into a medical ordeal. She said this was easier, just for a little while, just until her insomnia settled down and work stopped grinding her into dust. So he agreed. The guest room smelled faintly of dust and old linens, the kind of room reserved for holidays and obligation. He carried a small stack of clothes into it, his toothbrush, his phone charger. The bed felt wrong, too firm, too still, missing the warmth he'd grown used over nearly a decade. That first night, he lay awake longer than he expected, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around him. From down the hall, he could hear Karen moving, drawers opening and closing, the soft shuffle of her feet as she prepared for bed. It felt intimate and distant at the same time. At exactly 10 o'clock, he heard it. The sound was sharp and unmistakable. Metal sliding into metal. A deadbolt locking. The noise cut through the quiet house and lodged itself somewhere uncomfortable in his chest. They had never locked interior doors before. Not once in 8 years. Their home had always been open inside, rooms flowing into each other like trust made physical. But he told himself he was overthinking it. People do strange things when they're anxious, when they're tired. Sleep deprivation made people crave control, and maybe this was hers. The next morning, over coffee, he asked casually, not accusing, just curious. She didn't even hesitate. She said locking the door helped her feel safe, that it calmed her mind, that knowing the door was locked made it easier to fall asleep. The explanation sounded rehearsed, but also harmless. He nodded, kissed her forehead, told himself it wasn't worth turning into an issue. That should have been the end of it. But nights have a way of repeating themselves until patterns form, and patterns are harder to ignore. Every night after that followed the same rhythm. Karen disappeared into the master bedroom around 10. The door closed. The deadbolt clicked. Every single night. The sound became a marker of time, like a clock he never asked for. He would be lying in the guest room, phone dark in his hand, waiting for it without realizing he was waiting at all. And when it came, something inside him tightened. After a week, he asked again. This time she gave a different reason. She said she'd been sleepwalking. Said she was afraid she might wander around the house at night and hurt herself. Locking the door kept her contained, safe. The logic was neat. Too neat. But again, he swallowed his doubt. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who interrogated his wife over things that could be explained away. He wanted to be understanding, supportive, the kind of man she deserved. Weeks passed, then months. The temporary arrangement stretched quietly, seamlessly, until it stopped being discussed at all. He slept alone every night while Karen locked herself away. Every morning she emerged from the bedroom, looking composed, rested enough, smiling like nothing was wrong. They ate breakfast together. They talked about work. They laughed at the news. From the outside, they looked like a normal couple navigating a stressful phase. From the inside, something was eroding. He missed the small things first. The weight of her leg against his. The way she would steal the blankets. The soft, unconscious sound she made her sleep. He missed falling asleep together. The shared silence that didn't need words. Intimacy didn't disappear all at once. It faded. Attempts were postponed. Touch became rare. Excuses piled up neatly on top of one another until he stopped asking. Loneliness is a strange thing when it lives in the same house as the person you love. He began to feel like a guest in his own marriage, like someone passing through a life that used to belong to him. The locked door at night stopped being just a door. It became a symbol, a boundary, a line drawn that he wasn't allowed to cross. Still, he trusted her. Trust can be stubborn. It can survive discomfort. It can ignore instincts screaming for attention. He told himself that marriages go through phases, that stress does strange things to people, that love meant patience, not suspicion. So when his unease surfaced, he buried it beneath rational explanations and self-reproach. He convinced himself that questioning her was a failure on his part, not a response to something being wrong. Then the sound started. At first, they were easy to dismiss. A laugh that could have been a video. A murmur that could have been a podcast. Houses settle at night. Walls carry noise. He told himself this over and over while lying awake in the guest room, staring into the dark. But the sounds came again the next night, and the night after that. Voices, plural. Movement that didn't belong to someone sleeping alone. One night, curiosity overcame restraint. He padded down the hallway and stood outside the master bedroom door, heart pounding like he was doing something forbidden. He pressed his ear against the wood. He could hear her, clearly. Her voice had a brightness to it he hadn't heard directed at him in months. There was excitement in her tone, engagement. He knocked. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. When she answered, her voice was sharp with irritation. She told him she was fine, said she'd been watching videos, told him to go back to bed and stop worrying. The next morning, she dismissed his concerns entirely, suggesting he was imagining things, that the house made noise, that he was letting the separate sleeping arrangement mess with his head. When he insisted, she shifted her story again, said she watched shows on her phone to relax, said she'd use headphones, apologized just enough to sound reasonable. But the sounds didn't stop. Instead, the explanations multiplied, and with them, his confusion. Every question he asked turned into an accusation against him. Why didn't he trust her? Why was he spying? Why was he trying to find problems where there were none? Each time, he backed down. Each time, a piece of his certainty broke off and fell away. The marriage he thought was solid began to feel like something staged. Conversations were polite. Affection was minimal. The distance between them grew until it felt intentional, curated. He began to wonder if this version of his life was the one she wanted him to see, while something else existed just beyond his reach. The night she told him he'd be working late the following Tuesday, something shifted inside him. He watched her face when he said it, really watched it. The relief flashed too quickly for her to hide. It wasn't subtle. It was real. And in that moment, every excuse he'd accepted collapsed under the weight of a single realization. Whatever was happening behind that locked door required him to be gone. That was when patience ended. He didn't feel anger yet, or betrayal. What he felt was clarity. A cold, steady resolve born from months of being made to doubt himself. He didn't want explanations anymore. He wanted the truth. Not filtered, not softened, not delivered in carefully chosen words over breakfast. He needed to see it. The plan formed quietly, the way dangerous ideas often do. The walk-in closet, the timing, the waiting. It felt insane. It felt humiliating, but it also felt necessary. Because whatever lived behind that locked door had already taken something from him, and he couldn't continue living alongside a mystery that was eating his marriage alive. That night, as he prepared to lie to his wife about working late, he felt something final settle in his chest. A sense that once the door locked again, there would be no returning to ignorance. That whatever he discovered would change not just how he saw her, but how he understood every moment that had led them here. As he watched her disappear into the bedroom that evening, unaware of what was about to unfold, one thought echoed through his mind, relentless and unavoidable. What kind of truth requires a locked door, and how much of his life had already been sealed behind it? The house changed after that decision, though nothing about it looked different on the surface. Same walls, same furniture, same quiet suburban street outside the windows. But once suspicion takes root, even familiar spaces begin to feel hostile, as if they're keeping secrets of their own. Every hallway seemed longer, every closed door heavier, and every night, the sound of that deadbolt locking no longer felt strange. It felt deliberate. From a guest room, The darkness pressed closer than before. He found himself listening instead of sleeping, counting seconds, memorizing rhythms. Karen's routine had become predictable in the way Eli's often are. Around 9:30, movement upstairs. Around 10, the door. Then the lock. Always the lock. It never failed. What failed was his ability to ignore it. The sounds returned, clearer now that his attention was sharpened. Muffled laughter slipped through the walls, too soft to be accidental, too warm to belong to a screen playing in the background. Sometimes it was a single voice, hers, rising and falling as if responding to someone else. Other times, it was the shifting of weight on the bed, the faint creak of the frame, movement that suggested energy rather than rest. He tried to explain it away. Stress can distort perception. Loneliness can turn shadows into threats. He repeated these ideas to himself like prayers, hoping they would quiet the unease. But the sounds didn't stop, and neither did the tightening in his chest every time he heard them. One night, he stood outside the bedroom door again, this time not out of curiosity, but desperation. The hallway light was off, leaving the space dim and narrow, like a tunnel leading somewhere he wasn't supposed to go. He pressed his ear to the door and listened. Her voice floated through the wood. Not loud, not hidden, alive. It wasn't the content that struck him. It was the tone. There was excitement there. Engagement. A softness she hadn't used with him in months. It was the sound of someone being seen, being wanted, and it hollowed him out in a way he couldn't fully articulate. When he knocked, the silence came faster than before. The suddenness of it sent a jolt through him. It was as if the room itself had gone still, holding its breath. When Karen responded, her voice carried irritation edged with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or annoyance at being interrupted. She told him she was fine, that he was imagining things, that he needed to stop worrying and go back to bed. He did, but sleep didn't come. The next morning, he brought it up carefully, choosing his words like he was walking through broken glass. He didn't accuse. He expressed concern. He said the sounds were strange, that they didn't sound like someone watching videos quietly. Karen's reaction was immediate and dismissive. She laughed it off, said the house made noises, suggested he was projecting his discomfort with sleeping separately onto harmless things. When he insisted, when he said he knew he'd heard her voice, she pivoted smoothly. Said she watched videos to calm her mind. Said she'd start using headphones. Apologized just enough to end the conversation. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her. Because the alternative meant accepting that something fundamental was broken, not just in their marriage, but in his understanding of the woman he'd built his life around. The headphones changed nothing. Night after night, the sounds continued. Sometimes laughter, sometimes what sounded like music, sometimes silence broken by murmured words spoken with intention. The explanations stopped evolving. Instead, Karen began turning the problem back on him entirely. She accused him of spying, of being paranoid, of creating issues because he was unhappy with the arrangement she'd already explained a dozen times. Each conversation followed the same arc. He would express concern. She would deny. Then she would attack the concern itself, reframing it as distrust, as a flaw in him. And because he loved her, because he didn't want to be the man who suspected his wife without proof, he folded every time. But folding doesn't erase doubt. It just pushes it deeper. The intimacy that once defined their relationship had vanished completely now. Not gradually, decisively. Touch became functional. Hugs were brief. Kisses were polite. When he tried to bridge the gap, she shut him down with exhaustion, with stress, with promises that things would improve later. Always later. Always once something else resolved. He began to feel like a placeholder in his own life. The guest room became a place of quiet torment. Each night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to a world he was no longer part of. The locked door upstairs wasn't just keeping him out. It was keeping him uninformed, powerless. And the longer it stayed locked, the clearer it became that this separation wasn't a side effect of her problems. It was a choice. He started questioning moments from the past few months, replaying them with new eyes. The way she guarded her phone, the way she angled her laptop away from him, the way her mood lifted in the evenings before disappearing into the bedroom, the way she sometimes smiled at nothing at all. These weren't coincidences. They were fragments of a pattern he'd been refusing to see. The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting or confrontation. It arrived quietly, in the form of a look. When he told her he'd be working late the following Tuesday, he watched her carefully this time. He expected disappointment or indifference. What he saw instead was relief. Quick, unfiltered, unmistakable. Her shoulders relaxed. Her expression softened. She masked it a second later, but it was too late. He'd seen it. In that moment, doubt solidified into certainty. A wife who missed her husband didn't react like that. That night, lying alone in the guest room, the sounds upstairs took on a different weight. They weren't ambiguous anymore. They were evidence waiting to be uncovered. And with that realization came a fear deeper than suspicion. The fear that whatever was happening had already gone on long enough to rewrite the truth of their marriage. He didn't want answers anymore. He needed them. The idea of the closet came to him not as a dramatic plan, but as a practical one. It was large, concealed, close enough to observe without being seen. The thought of hiding there made his stomach twist, but so did the thought of continuing to live in ignorance. If she was lying, then the lies had already done damage. If she wasn't, then seeing the truth would end the madness tearing him apart. Tuesday approached like a deadline. At work, he barely functioned. Numbers blurred. Conversations passed through him without registering. His mind kept returning to the image of the locked door, the sounds, the look on her face. Part of him still clung to the hope that he was wrong, that this would all end with embarrassment and relief. But another part, the one that had been whispering warnings for months, knew better. When he left the office that evening, his hands shook on the steering wheel. He followed his routine carefully, making sure Karen saw him come home. Then he left again, circling the block, parking where his car couldn't be seen. Each step back toward the house felt heavier than the last, as if he were walking toward a truth that couldn't be unlearned. Inside, the house was quiet. He moved silently, shoes in hand, heart hammering. Every sound felt amplified. The stairs creaked beneath him despite his care, but Karen didn't notice. He slipped into the bedroom while she was elsewhere and hid himself inside the closet, pulling the door nearly closed, leaving only a thin crack of vision. And as he crouched there in the dark, surrounded by her clothes, breathing shallowly to avoid detection, the weight of everything he'd ignored pressed down on him at once. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't paranoia. This was a man who had been pushed out of his own life, standing on the edge of a truth that had been locked away for months. And as time crawled forward toward 10 o'clock, one realization echoed louder than any sound from behind that door. Whatever he was about to witness wasn't just going to explain the past. It was going to destroy the future he thought he had. The closet smelled like fabric softener and dust, a mixture of familiarity and neglect. Dresses brushed against his shoulders as he crouched low behind them, knees drawn tight, spine curved in a way that sent dull pain blooming almost immediately. The door slid nearly shut, leaving only a narrow crack of light, just enough to see the bed, the nightstand, the door, just enough to witness whatever truth had been hiding in plain sight. Time slowed inside that dark space. Minutes stretched unnaturally long, marked only by the sound of his own breathing and the ache creeping steadily through his legs. Every shift of weight sent fear slicing through him. Fear of noise, of discovery, of the humiliation of being found like this. A grown man hiding in his own closet, spying on the woman he loved because trust had failed him. At 7, Karen entered the bedroom. His heart leapt violently, convinced she would open the closet and everything would end before it began. She didn't. She passed by, humming softly, disappearing into the bathroom. The shower turned on. Steam filled the room. Life continued, ordinary and unbothered, while he stayed frozen in place, invisible. She emerged wrapped in a towel, hair damp, moving with ease. He watched her go through motions he'd seen 1,000 times before, drying her hair, applying lotion, changing into pajamas. Nothing looked strange. Nothing looked wrong. The normalcy was almost cruel. For a moment, doubt crept back in, whispering that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he was about to destroy his marriage over nothing. By 9:30, she was in bed with her laptop, screen casting a pale glow across her face. She scrolled. She typed. She waited. At 10 o'clock sharp, she rose, crossed the room, and closed the door. The deadbolt clicked. The sound reverberated through him like a gunshot. She returned to the bed, settling against the pillows, eyes flicking between her phone and the laptop. She smiled. Not a polite smile, not a tired one, but something genuine, something bright. It was a smile he hadn't seen in months. Then she spoke. "Okay, he's gone," she said lightly. "Come on in. We have all night." The words hollowed him out instantly. For a fraction of a second, his mind tried to make sense of it. There was no one else in the room. The door was locked. He was the only other body there. And then a man's voice answered her. Warm, familiar, intimate, spilling from the laptop speakers. Finally, the voice said, "I've been waiting all day to see you, baby." The world tilted. Understanding arrived like a physical blow. This wasn't someone hiding in the house. This wasn't a shadow slipping through the door. This was something worse. Something calculated. Something she had made space for by removing him from the bedroom entirely. Karen laughed. A soft, girlish sound that twisted his stomach. She adjusted the laptop, angling the camera carefully. When she leaned back, he saw that the pajamas were gone. In their place was lingerie, black, delicate, expensive. Something he had never seen. Something she had never worn for him. She smiled at the screen the way she used to smile at him when their love was new. The man on the laptop told her she looked incredible. Told her he couldn't wait to touch her. She responded without hesitation, without guilt, without restraint. The bed they had shared for 8 years became a stage for a relationship that wasn't his. The realization was brutal in its clarity. This was why she needed the door locked. This was why he had been exiled to the guest room. This was why intimacy had vanished. He stayed hidden as the conversation deepened, turning intimate in ways that left no room for denial. They didn't speak like people flirting for the first time. They spoke like a couple, like lovers who knew each other's rhythms, who shared history. She said his name, Derek, with affection that cut deeper than any insult. For an hour, he watched his wife give another man everything she had taken from him. Her laughter, her desire, her attention. Then it went further. Explicit, unfiltered, unmistakable. She touched herself while watching him do the same, murmuring things she had never said to her husband. The bedroom filled with sounds he would never unhear. His body went numb, but his mind sharpened. This wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. Between moments of intimacy, they talked about their lives together, about how much they missed each other, about how these nights were the best part of their days, about a future that didn't include him. Then the conversation turned colder. Karen talked about divorce. She spoke casually, confidently, as if she were discussing a project at work. She told Derek about her lawyer, about strategy, about how carefully she had been documenting everything. Separate bedrooms, his late work hours, text messages, journals. She laughed as she explained how she turned his trust into evidence against him. He felt something inside him snap, not loudly, not violently, but completely. She talked about alimony, about the house, about money she had already moved into private accounts, about how just a few more months of playing nice would secure her future. He pulled his phone out with shaking hands and began recording. Every word, every admission, every plan. He recorded her laughing about lying, about business trips that were really weekends in hotel rooms with Derek, about how easy it had been to fool him, about how soon she would file and finally be free. 3 hours passed like this. 3 hours of betrayal, carefully preserved. When Derek finally logged off, Karen sat smiling in the dark, satisfied. She changed back into pajamas, turned off the light, and fell asleep within minutes, peaceful, unburdened, unaware. He waited. At 2 a.m, when her breathing was slow and deep, he slipped from the closet. Every movement felt deafening. The deadbolt clicked open. The door closed behind him. By sunrise, he was in a hotel, backing up recordings, making copies, reclaiming control. For months later, the judge heard the truth. Karen lost everything she thought she was so carefully securing. The locked door she believed protected her secrets had done the opposite. It had trapped her with a witness. And the marriage she dismantled in the dark had been rebuilt. Not with forgiveness, not with reconciliation, but with truth, preserved word for word, in a closet she never thought to check. Morning arrived without mercy. Sunlight crept through unfamiliar curtains, pale and indifferent, touching a room that wasn't his. The hotel smelled like detergent and stale air, a temporary place for a man who no longer had a home in the truest sense. He sat on the edge of the bed fully dressed, phone in his hands, staring at the screen where hours of recorded truth rested in neat digital files. Evidence. Proof. The remains of a life he thought he understood. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in the closet, back in the dark, hearing her voice say another man's name with love, hearing her laugh about dismantling his life like it was a clever game. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It had flattened into something colder, heavier. Resolve. By the time the city outside fully woke, he had already made copies of everything. Laptop, cloud storage, external drive, redundancy stacked on redundancy. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. Trust had nearly destroyed him once. He wouldn't let it happen again. At 9 o'clock, he sat in a leather chair across from a divorce attorney who had seen many endings, but very few beginnings like this. The man listened in silence as portions of the recordings played, his expression tightening with every minute. There was no interruption, no doubt. When the audio stopped, the attorney exhaled slowly and leaned back, eyes sharp with certainty. This wasn't just infidelity. This was strategy. This was manipulation. Papers were drafted immediately, filed the same day. Allegations supported not by suspicion, but by confession. Motions submitted to freeze accounts. Requests made to recover hidden funds. The truth moved fast once it was released from the dark. Karen didn't see it coming. The courier arrived on a quiet Saturday morning. A stack of documents. A letter. Clean. Clinical. Devastating. It explained everything without emotion. That her husband had been in the closet. That her affair was documented. That her plans had been overheard, recorded, preserved. That the door she locked every night hadn't protected her at all. Her calls started minutes later. 17 of them. He didn't answer a single one. The voicemails came in waves. First denial, then confusion, then rage, then fear. Finally, desperation. She accused him of betrayal, of invasion, of cruelty, as if hiding lies gave her ownership over the truth. He deleted them without listening all the way through. He had heard enough of her voice for a lifetime. The divorce dragged on for months, but the outcome was sealed the moment the judge heard the recordings. There was no sympathy for her arguments, no patience for her claims. The evidence spoke clearly, calmly, relentlessly. Her case collapsed. No alimony, no house, no narrative where she was the victim. She walked away with her personal belongings and the knowledge that every move she'd made in secret had been undone by her own words. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Truth doesn't require volume. When it was over, when the papers were signed and the accounts untangled, he stood alone in an apartment that was quiet in a different way than before. Not lonely, not tense, just empty and honest. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like space. He thought often about the door, about how it had once symbolized distance, then danger, then clarity, about how something as simple as a lock had nearly cost him everything, and then saved him from losing more. Some nights, he still woke up expecting to hear the click of a deadbolt, but it never came. And in that absence, he finally understood the truth that had taken 6 months, one closet, and a shattered marriage to learn. Some doors don't keep a trail out. They only delay the moment it's exposed.